Welcome to the Big Fat Gay Podcast, where we like to talk about the things weighing on our minds. I'm Michael, I am a chaser, and today I'm an old boy. I am now 30 years old, and I couldn't feel... this is the oldest I've ever felt in my entire life, so...
Just you wait, youngin'. Yeah. Just you wait.
No, I'd rather not.
My name's Don. I'm a big chubby guy living in sunny Hollywood, and today I am youthful at heart.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Dan Oliverio. I'm a chaser, and today I'm just calm and happy.
I'm Trevor I'm a super chub living in West Hollywood with Dan, and I am free from the curse of Michael. I'm no longer a dog, and I'm a real boy again.
Come back. Damn it. I need to work on my magic. I wanted to start this week off by checking in once again with the three of you, because we are still in the middle of this quarantine, which I'm realizing more and more that anyone who may be listening down the road to these archival episodes is going to be like, they're already going to know how long this lasted. And if this is like, if we're 10% in at this point, they're just going to be laughing at our dumb selves like, oh no, they have no idea what's coming down the pipeline.
It's always rough. And listening to old podcasts, like, you don't even know. You're screaming at the radio, trying to warn them.
It's weird watching like television right now, because you just see all these people hanging out together, doing things together, and you're like, I remember that world. Yeah.
They're doing it wrong. So how are you guys doing? How are you holding up? Are you still, is it the same old at this point, or has anything changed?
It's very repetitive, yes. I am the same as I was the same.
The same as I was the same. I like that.
Yeah, I'm definitely finding like a lack of physical contact is just, it's wearing me down. I recharge with people, you know, and it's not an extrovert's world right now.
Yeah, I definitely am getting that sense. And I live with Julia and Max, but I think there's still this like inherent need to keep some distance, just in case, just because. And I'm actually worried about the long-term ramifications of that, of like, at what point does that start to become ingrained behavior? Like, how long do we do this until the point where it's now instinctive to keep distant from people? I guess we'll find out, but there's a happy thought for you.
Never touch anyone again.
I was actually thinking, like, the day they lift the quarantine, you're just going to have people rushing out into the street and hugging random strangers.
Yep. Or people karate chopping strangers running at them.
Guess which of us is the introvert?
Someone asked me like, oh, how's your weekend going? I'm like, it's been like every other day for the past like month, but okay, I guess.
Maybe we should set up something like specific on weekends to signal that it is a weekend. Like, what would you set up to differentiate your weekend from your weekday right now during the quarantine?
I think like a Mary Poppins style cannon shot that echoes out over the city. Like,
I was going to say an air raid siren just going for the entire weekend.
Yeah.
That's nonstop. Way too Silent Hill for me.
So last week we had our Modern Family episode, which I had a lot of fun recording. And somebody wrote in that I had a very interesting response actually just last night. And I kind of wanted to share that because I thought it was a good perspective from another chaser who had a very different, I think, experience of that show than Dan or I did. Or at least somewhat different, because for Dan and me, the take on the show was basically, it's lovely, but it doesn't represent the chaser experience. It's more about like they're a mismatched size couple, but Mitch is not a chaser. And so it didn't quite connect that way for us. Yeah. But he wrote in saying that, you know, his experience was, you know, very similar to a lot of chasers, where he was struggling with his sexuality and didn't see himself attracted to what most gay people were attracted to. And so he didn't know how to reconcile that. And it took until he was 21 to really come to terms with the fact that he was gay, because he wasn't attracted to the traditional types of guys. And seeing Modern Family on network television and seeing that the fact that a gay person could be attracted to somebody who was fat connected the dots for him that, yes, he was gay. It helped him find his homosexual identity through the fact that somebody else could be fat and also attractive to another gay person.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I thought that was a really interesting point to make, because those 2 points didn't connect for me at the same time like it did for him. And I can really appreciate that seeing that for the first time could be so important for somebody who's maybe a little bit younger and like still getting going on their journey. Whereas, for me, it came along a little later in my life.
That's what I was talking about before, the importance of like if you have that moment where you recognize yourself in something that you watch for the first time, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
That
definitely.
representation is everything.
So Trevor,
Yes. So I have been, as many people have, just watching so much stuff, which has included rewatching the show Ugly Betty, which I love.
Where are you able to watch that right now?
Hulu.
Okay.
So those of you who don't know, Ugly Betty was an adaptation of Betty La Fea, a telenovela about a gawky girl who works at a fashion magazine, and kind of it's a soap opera. Like, telenovela is a soap opera, but I want to say it's like a American soap opera, but dialed up to 13. So much of the show, and just rewatching the first season, I'm like, oh, I remember all these plot points, but I thought they were like multiple seasons. The first season has like 3 to 4 seasons worth of drama packed in.
It is.
But in the second season, one of the characters, Mark St. James, who is the assistant to the villainess of the series, starts dating a chubby photographer, which I completely forgot about. And it's interesting because you see him, he's attracted to this guy, but he's conflicted because he's like, I shouldn't be attracted to this guy. He works around models, so he's, seeing him slowly be attracted to this guy, but also then like asking a model out and struggling with the fact that he likes this guy that does not fit into his world. And unfortunately, the relationship has an unhappy ending, but the chubby guy breaks up with him because he's like, you don't see what you have here, and I'm not going to deal with you trying to chase something else.
I think that's really great because the character, the thin guy, that character, like he's not ready for a relationship, I think, thin or fat. And he's certainly not ready to include someone who's literally too big for his world.
Yes.
Yeah. And I really like that they give the power to the fat guy to be the one to make a choice, to be the one who's it's not just a given that he's going to need the relationship and stay no matter what. It's like, actually this is not working because you're not ready, and I'm worth, I deserve somebody who's going to be ready for me.
Anyway, Ugly Betty, you can watch it on Hulu. Definitely check it out. It is just delightful quarantine watching.
And I'm curious, before we move on, what do you know what network that originally aired on?
I think ABC.
Oh, interesting, because that's also Modern Family.
Yeah.
That's the same network as Modern Family. Good for you, ABC. Good for you. So, Mr. Trevor, do we have another Lizzo watch today?
It's Lizzo watch. So last week I talked about the One World Together at Home concert, which was last night.
I didn't see any of it. Did you?
I saw a little bit. It's sweet. I mean, it's such a weird time, and it's just weird, like, here's celebrities in their home singing. But it's nice. It's, we're all in this together. One world. So Lizzo performed A Change Is Gonna Come. And it's Lizzo, so it's an amazing performance. And it's, she's, I don't know if she's on her patio or if she's just outside her, like on her balcony or something, but it's a lovely performance. And it also coincided with the 1 anniversary of the release of 'Cause I Love You, which it's been 1 year, and that's kind of what really brought Lizzo into the mainstream. She's been around for a while, but really in this past year has kind of been when she has, I feel like, really moved into the public conversation.
Nice.
So happy anniversary, Lizzo. Thank you for everything.
Thank you for brightening our days.
And I just remembered the visual I had in my head of last week, opening a closet and a giant inflatable butt bursting out like
the Kool-Aid guy.
Well, honey, your birthday's coming up.
Yes. That's what I want for my birthday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A giant inflatable butt. Hey,
Yes.
Hey,
I feel
listeners.
like Dan and Michael would love to have a big, giant inflatable butt bouncy house for their birthday parties.
I mean, I'll take just a regular big giant butt for my birthday.
Yeah, that doesn't have to be plastic and inflatable.
So this week we actually got a couple requests from listeners to watch the same episode of a documentary series on PBS called Nova. In this case, it was an episode called The Truth About Fat, which is an hour-long documentary going into a lot of different factors around sort of fat, not the macronutrient as we had earlier this year, but the actual sort of
People being
cell
fat.
in your body and people being fat and what causes it and all that stuff. And so we all sat down and watched it, and we haven't talked about this at all. So fresh reactions in the moment. Dan, did you want to kind of set up a little bit more detail about the documentary before we get into the specifics of our reactions for it?
I guess the best way into it is to say that there are a number of documentaries about fat, both the experience of being fat, the macronutrient fat, or things called, the supposed obesity epidemic. And it's Nova, so it's the approachable version of some of the biochemical processes involved. I have a lot to say about this category of documentary, but I think I'll save that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get to it, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll get to it, yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know really what it was at all walking in, just knowing that it was people were interested in hearing our reactions and it's about fat. And so it's like I kind of walked in blind, ready to learn and kind of make my own judgments. And it was a really mixed experience, I have to say. I mean, it was interesting. It was very interesting to watch. It was extremely difficult to watch in certain places. There's a section about The Biggest Loser, which I wasn't expecting to come up, and it was so sudden that it felt like I was watching literal torture, and it was very upsetting. So if that's something that you're sensitive to, just know that walking in. That would be my sort of warning before you dive into it.
I think the whole, thing that we always kind of come back to is like, it's something.
It's something.
There's so many points where I was like, yes, and then no. Specifically, one of the talking heads, one of the scientists says, as a point, she's like, it's not your fault. And I'm like, yes, thank you. And then it's a disease. And it's like,
no, it is literally not a disease.
So I think the elephant in the room, which we should just get to now because we can talk about the details.
I have a name.
The other elephant in the room. No. Basically, it's everything that they investigate is still predicated on the premise that obesity is an epidemic and a disease. And the thing that threw me as I was watching that, I was waiting for them to correct, which they never did, was everything is acting on the assumption that obesity causes mortality. And in a variety of different ways, but they never explain how or why. They just say this is what the end result of being obese is.
And even worse, the first third of the documentary sets up that it's not causal because you can be obese and healthy, you can be thin and unhealthy. They set that all up, and then they end with, but of course we have to combat the obesity epidemic because it's killing people. Mm-hmm. And it sort of contradicts itself because they've already presented the evidence that vitiates that.
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily take it that way. My interpretation of it was that they had to set up the mainstream belief systems around fat in order to show any sort of contrast.
No, but that's not how it's structured. They start with the radical idea that fat isn't death, but that's how they end. It does not vary from the dogma that it's causal, that obesity is causing this, which is very demonstrably proven false. Even in the documentary, you can see that it's not the cause. It's part, and in fact, in medical circles, it's called metabolic syndrome, and being fat is one of the things in that syndrome. But you can certainly have what's called metabolic syndrome or syndrome X without being fat.
One of my biggest problems with the documentary was the gastric bypass segment.
Oh,
which is just such a weird, like, micro chunk of exploring a topic, because they explore so many different topics, and it was balanced because they say, okay, this is what we think, but also this. Showing what the mainstream thinks versus what research shows. And they don't really go in depth into gastric bypass. It's like, oh, here's a solution for the super obese, and this girl lost weight, and it's like, good for you. And then they move on.
Yeah. Well, what's worse is they say this is the only solution for the super obese.
Yes.
They really leaned hard into it and didn't So for me, as we have set the show up, our own show from the very beginning, most of the stuff I am learning about as we go. Like I'm not bringing a whole lot of prior knowledge. And so for me watching the documentary, I was expecting to learn. I was, as you would with any documentary that you would hope would be well made. And I did. It meant like lots of new information for me, or at least explained in a way that I hadn't heard before in many different subjects, which was fascinating. And like Trevor said, when they got to the part about bariatric surgery, the story suddenly became very much about, here's this girl and she saw her mother die and she wanted to lose weight. And so she got a surgery, and that surgery was a cure for her. She cured her disease of obesity. Great, moving on. And I was like, wait, isn't there more here? Isn't there more? Like, what research was done around this?
Also, I feel like there was stuff missing from her story, because she talks about going to the cardiologist, but it's like, okay, but her mother died of heart disease, and like, we don't know if there was any kind of history of any kind of heart condition or anything. The mom's fat. She died of a heart attack.
There's no explanation. And that's what I mean when I say they never posited any evidence of this amount of weight on this person caused this disease or death or issue
because you
one to one.
You can't prove it. You can't prove it. You can't. It's very difficult to prove causality in biology. Almost impossible. All you can get is high degree of correlation, and then maybe it kind of looks like causality. Right. And that's what we're struggling with here. And you know, when I look at this, like you said, you just came to this and you expected to learn. And you know, Trevor and I were dreading watching this. Is that fair to say, Trevor?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was interested, and then when I found it, I'm like, I want to know what is the trajectory of this documentary? And I skipped around, and I saw the end was this whole gastric bypass thing. I'm like, nope, I don't really want to.
Well, and so my point about that is that you can ask the question, so who should see this? We've talked about the fact that many of the scenes in it are very triggering. On the other hand, Michael's pointed out that you could learn a lot. And I think one of the takeaways is that it's, you know, that being fat is not a question of willpower or gumption, which I think is an important thing for people to take away.
Yeah.
So who is it for? And what you get in the fatosphere, which is the sort of the political world of fatness, is that for people like me, we dread this because of the health conversation, not because we shouldn't be having it, but because that conversation doesn't make a difference in fat oppression. It's not that people have this mistaken idea that fat causes death, and that's why we make fat people's lives hell. That's not how this goes. It doesn't combat the original prejudice that fat people get mistreated. Oh, well, why? Well, because fat is unhealthy. How does that explain it?
Well, this documentary was very specific to physiological. It didn't actually have anything to do with psychological.
No. What I'm saying doesn't have to do with this particular documentary. It has to do with the fact that these documentaries don't have an impact because the argument against fat isn't biological, it's societal. Even if you say that fat is a disease and we must stamp it out, people who have diseases and the disease needs to get stamped out, they don't get treated like fat people. And so there's sort of a two-tiered system. And a lot of the information in this documentary, we have known this for 50 years, for 70 years, for 100 years. There is not a lot that's new here in many cases. And so it's like, oh, science is discovering. No, science has known this forever. But it doesn't make a difference to how fat people get treated. And so that's the disconnect. So in some ways, yes, if this is news for you, you absolutely should see it. On the other hand, I don't think that documentaries like this move the needle because the needle isn't about medicine.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think the one thing, when we're not just talking about information, you know, which I think it is very informative for somebody like me who hasn't heard a lot of this stuff from the horse's mouth, as it were, there's one aspect that you and Trevor both said, which is that it does very clearly try to make the point that it is not a matter of willpower. It's not a matter of laziness. It is not a moral flaw. They don't go into all of the other societal aspects of that. They say from a biological standpoint, this is something that people cannot control, but they leave it there. But I think even that starting point is still important for some people to hear. That can be very reassuring. But like you said, like they also leave it. They walk away from that and they don't investigate the psychological impacts of societal judgment
and let me be clear, I don't think that's the documentary's job.
Well, again, it didn't attempt to.
Exactly right, Don. It's not its intent. I'm not faulting the documentary for that. That's beyond its scope. I'm talking about the general idea that if we had enough of these documentaries, things would change. No, it wouldn't.
Well, and also let's keep in mind that this is an episode of Nova. This is not a greater documentary that went out. It's basically all of the episodes of Nova are introductions to different scientific concepts. So as an introduction goes, I don't think this was bad.
No, I don't think it's bad either.
Yeah, no, it actually went in and explained. Like, I disagree with Dan about the total setup of it. My takeaway was very much of one of, like, they consistently brought up the mainstream impression of things and then deviated from it a little bit to try and show a different side. But they did keep the mainstream impressions as their anchor point, which is problematic. One thing that I started thinking about when I was watching it was comparisons to early studies on gay and lesbian people in the United States.
Absolutely.
Where if the initial assumption was, if you're gay and lesbian, you have more self-destructive tendencies. Like, you want to kill yourself more often, and that's because you're gay. And it wasn't until they started looking at it in a slightly more holistic way and realizing, like, oh, if you're gay, people hate you and treat you badly, and that makes you want to kill yourself. Oh, so it's not, it's that causal versus correlational.
Exactly right.
I feel like this underscored the fact that fat is still looked at through the lens of whatever scientific specialty the individual is using to study it. There's no sort of holistic approach where everyone's using psychology and physiology and genetics and evolution. Everyone's looking at it through their own tiny lens. Well, so they see a different part of the elephant.
I think they are looking at through all those things, but the underlying premise is, how are we going to get rid of fat people?
Right. How are we going to cure fat?
I don't know. But also with what Don said, so reframing that it's not your fault. It's a disease. It's like, defending gay people, like, well, it's not their fault. It's a mental disease.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how my father made peace. That's how my father made peace with my being gay. He considered it a birth defect.
And that goes back to episode 1 of this show where, we're going to grant protections to obese people at work because it's a disability. Okay, no, but it's something.
it's something.
It's something. Yeah.
At the end of the day, I thought they had a really interesting, as a thing that you can watch. I thought it was presented for the most part in a very interesting way, where it was well produced, and you got to see a lot of different aspects of this world, and you got to see a lot of different types of research. I think it was a well produced documentary. The section about The Biggest Loser bothered me, but I don't think that's their fault. I think it's just something that triggers me personally.
I agree. It's very triggering, but it's very appropriate.
Yes. Yeah. And I thought that was very well handled, which why I was so kind of then put off by the gastric bypass segment, because looking at all of these individual topics within fat that they cover, they look at both sides and they do investigate kind of the pros, cons, middle, whatever. But they don't do that with the gastric bypass. It's just this weird, it just felt so weird, because it just felt like, okay, well, we have to have this in, and here's the solution for people who are really, 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 really fat.
It almost felt like that section was like edited and or directed by a different person entirely, because they also went into this world of like, here's this girl who I think she was a teenager. I don't think when they shot it, she was even
a teenager.
And they had this whole, like, it was her story. They made it very personal, which is a different approach from the rest of the documentary for the most part. But they also ended on her with like a headshot of her modeling, and then they cut to a different interview of her where she has a lot more makeup on, and it's after she lost the weight, and she starts talking about how she has so much more self-confidence now because she got this surgery. And it felt like it suddenly moved into this world, and maybe this is just my sort of allergy to manipulative storytelling, but like it really felt like where, like Trevor, the 30 Rock episode where they're talking about reality TV, and it's like, it's when you play that music in the background and you think that you're feeling something, but nothing's actually changed and it sucks. It's like, it just feels sort of manipulative, like, hey, happy ending. Like, look how thin she is and happy that she is that she's thin. And like Dan was saying, like, it's like, well, but it's not that she's happier because she lost weight. It's she's happier that people are treating her differently. Or like that's the thing we're not talking about, that you're sort of, that one section suddenly became a fluff piece about something that should have been investigated much deeper than it was.
And that is never a medical issue. Mm-hmm. How people get treated is not a medical issue.
Right.
Part of it, though, is I think documentaries in general focus on the other, right? They never focus on you, on the general person. So with this, they're focusing on the fat person, but they've never seen a documentary that focuses on how people treat fat people. Like not where you're following around a fat person, but you're following around like, go to a supermarket and film the people who take other people's chips out of their basket and put it back on the shelf. And that sort of shit.
I want to know the answer to that, actually. Like if anyone out there listening has seen or knows of a documentary that's like what Don just described, I want to see that.
Well, I mean, getting back to Don's point about this being a documentary, and like if we just talk about the documentary, I think that if you're looking for a primer on the biology of fatness, this is a pretty good documentary. I think, Trevor, you'd agree with that too?
Yeah, no, I think
it's just that if you're looking for the fat experience, this in no way captures it.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely think it's worth checking out. I mean, if you're still listening to this podcast, I think it's worth checking out this episode of Nova.
Yeah, it's available free to watch. We can share the link to it. You can watch the whole thing. There's only one commercial at the very beginning, and the rest of it is ready for you to consume. It's 53 minutes and change. Mm-hmm. I would say well worth watching. Just sort of know what you're going into to experience and what you're going in to learn about ahead of time. So here's my question then. At the end of this, Dan, somebody comes up to you and says, "I am going to make a documentary about being fat in this world, and I don't know how to focus it. I don't know how do I make it specific and interesting in a way that needs to be heard. What do I do to make this the right documentary for people to watch? Like what
I think that's a great
like?
question. And again, I agree with a lot of what Don said, that this is Nova. They've got a job to do and they did it well. And so what I would respond to is, what interests you about it? What is the issue that burns for you such that you want to go to the time, effort, and expense of making a documentary? What is it that you want to capture? Mm-hmm. Or what is it you want to investigate? And, for some people, that is the question, why am I fat? Or why are there fat people? That's kind of what this Nova documentary is exploring. And for other people, it would be, what is the experience of being fat? And why does the medical angle, why does the disease so-called aspect not come anywhere near that? And there are many, many other facets too. You could investigate clothing, like how we don't make clothing for people, we make clothing to sell to people. It's size and fit is not really relevant because you're supposed to fit into this. And if you don't, isn't that really more your fault than the clothes? Mm-hmm. So you could have a fashion angle. You could have a whole bunch of different angles. And I would really get to, and how I would apply this to, say, the listener is that you can find a lot of this stuff already online, in books, in magazine articles. What do you want to know about? What do you want to capture? What is the area that you either have a chip on your shoulder about, and rightly so, or what is the area that you just feel undereducated in? Believe me, it's already out there. Most of the stuff in this Nova documentary was already out there for 10, 15, 30, 50, 100 years. But nobody cares.
I got to say, I didn't actually learn anything new.
And let's reframe for a second, because I think the important factor here is that just like the guy who watched Modern Family when he was 21 years old and saw it for the first time presented in this one way, this will be somebody's first experience to that information.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's who should watch this.
Right. So that particular documentary or documentary episode would be great for somebody as a primer. For me, if I were to go out and make a documentary about fat, it would definitely be from a psychological standpoint. What does American society do to a fat person, and how do different, because people handle it very differently. I know many, I would say I have about, this is a very judgmental thing to say, but just based on people that have talked to me and volunteered this information to me, about a 50-50 percentage of fat friends who are either what they would call themselves well-adjusted and basically fine, or people that really have a lot of struggles with it. And that split, I think, is also really interesting, is just as far as people I know, like what changes there. What, like, for instance, a friend of mine said that he had a hard time relating to some of the episodes that we talked about, like doctors not, being not understanding the experience or not focusing on the right things, because in his life he has never had that happen. And so clearly there are different points and places where that's not the case, or where it very much is the case. And I'd be curious, following the people and their psychological and emotional responses to, in this case, it would be American society, but even just the many, many different facets of that, like in the different regions of our country that treat people, I think, differently.
So what you're pitching is actually the opposite of what the Nova documentary was. Where you're basically pitching the psychology of fat.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
the sociology of fat, which I don't think there's been tons of research, but I don't think there's been much in the way of documentarian focus.
I think because it'd be really hard to watch. I mean, it's really hard to watch a group of 5, 6, 7-year-olds say that they would rather be maimed than be fat. They'd rather be in a wheelchair than be someone who's fat and made fun of.
Yeah. I mean, and I will say, people who watch documentaries frequently aren't doing it to, for the happy feel goods. Like, they're doing it to learn. They're doing it to...
Well, the thing is, people also only watch documentaries that really kind of focus on their life in some way.
I disagree with that. The people that I know who watch documentaries are actively looking to broaden their horizons.
That's a documentary watcher. I'm talking about a mainstream audience approaching a documentary. They're usually only going to focus on documentaries that touch on their life in some way.
And it's inherently confronting. The person that Don's talking about, I might have this issue. I kind of relates to me. There's something inherently confronting if you're, a fat person watching a documentary on fatness. If you're a gay person watching a documentary on the gays, there's something, you have a horse in that race. As opposed to, you're watching a documentary about sub-Saharan Africa, and isn't that interesting?
Well, yeah, and I think that gets into a different issue, though, which is what is the best method of changing the culture? It's a swell of things that has to happen collectively, that has to slowly change the social consciousness. It's not. I
always come back to stories. Like, in this day and age, it's television. It's it's representation, seeing people that are fat and sympathizing with them and understanding that they are like you. Like, that's what Will and Grace did for gay people.
I 100% agree. I think that's exactly it, Don.
Yeah, it's mainstream entertainment that changes things, and by letting people see things a different way to begin with.
Yeah, and not letting people off the hook of like, well, yes, they're very sympathetic and they're very fat, but they are diseased, and that's sometimes when we medicalize fatness. That's what we do. We give people an excuse to be bigoted because, well, they're diseased. That should be eliminated. And people don't get that, how come that only happens with fat people? We talk about morbid obesity or super morbid obesity, but you know what? I've never heard the term morbidly cancerous.
There's I remember, oh God, I'll have to find it at some point, seeing an interview with someone who worked at the CDC, right? The Center for Disease Control. And they were basically asked about, why is fat considered a disease? And that person was basically saying, like, well, it's not. It's not. But by doing so, the CDC was able to actually contribute resources towards it. So it was entirely a political and economic reason for it. But then the media picked up on it as being sort of a great way to sort of portray this. And
it is. It's a great way to make it emergent, to make it an emergency. And, it's not a disease. Why? And I said that at the beginning of the podcast. It is literally not a disease. There is no pathogen. And by the way, just to put a nail on that, one of the benefits of obesity is obese people do not get osteoporosis.
That is something they almost say that. They almost say that, and they say two things. They say that fat cells can contribute to a lot of different aspects of a person, including bone health. And then they also say when somebody is emaciated and they get too thin, they can get osteoporosis. but they don't connect the dots, and they don't say that one thing. Because I wondered that while I was watching. I was like, wait, so does that mean that if you're fat, you have very strong bone health? And they never answer that question.
Anyway.
So I think to summarize, it's very informative primer to the subject of the biology of fat. But there are definitely problem areas that we've outlined. And if you go in, just sort of know that it's not going to be all encompassing. And there are definitely moments that can be distressing just as a watcher. And it's not going to address every aspect because it's not setting out to. It's going to inform you on these certain subjects.
Yeah, it's not its job.
Yeah. But thank you to the listeners for suggesting it. And I'm glad it came across my radar and I got to watch something and spend an hour talking about a subject that is very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I did bring a tip, or excuse me, I brought a bit for us today. Mm-hmm. So I got a little lazy and I kept the format I made up last week, where I have 4 trivia questions with different categories for each of you to explore at your will. Michael, do you want to go first this time?
Sure.
We have 4 categories today. We have a wholesome diet, seeing a thinner you, MC Hammer would approve, or side effects may include.
I want to do seeing a thinner you.
Seeing a thinner you. All right. The Vision diet was invented in the late 2000s by a Japanese inventor, which states, 1, wearing blue-tinted sunglasses will promote weight loss. 2, watching Paul Bettany as the Vision in Avengers promotes weight loss. 3, 10 minutes of meditation twice a day where you envision your perfect body will help your body course correct. Or 4, hallucinogenics can be used to enhance weight loss.
I really, really want it to be about Vision in the Avengers. I want to believe that somebody thought that
Paul Bettany
was...
promotes weight loss.
Yes, I want to believe that that's the case. I don't think it is. I think that if I had to guess, I would say it would be number 3, that meditating on the better you and envisioning yourself in a different body is supposed to somehow promote a thinner you. Is that
okay? We're going with number 3, meditation. Okay, the correct answer is number 1. Wearing blue tinted sunglasses will promote weight loss.
How? What was his theory?
So you can still buy these things. These blue tinted sunglasses are available on the market. The premise is fast food restaurants for years have known that orange and red promote appetite, right? A lot of our most appetizing foods are red and orange and browns. So blue is supposed to be the least appetizing color. Yes. So by wearing these blue sunglasses, it's supposed to make everything look less interesting to eat.
I did actually notice in the documentary, whenever they're showing the stock footage of people eating junk food, it was very orange. It was like orange soda and Cheetos, and there was just
pizza.
So much, not even just red.
A lot of junk food
orange.
is. Even like a lot of the baked goods, it's like an orangish brown and that sort of thing.
I wonder if people try it wearing these blue glasses?
Yes, and there was absolutely no evidence to support their premise whatsoever. Not a drop.
Oh. So we know it works.
I think, Trevor, you're up.
Okay. Remind me the sections.
A wholesome diet, MC Hammer would approve, or side effects may include.
I want to do side effects may include.
Damn, that's what I wanted to choose.
I think you're going to know this one, but all good. Olestra was a fat that could not be absorbed by the body and was used to mass produce low-fat junk food. Which of the following were not side effects caused by Olestra?
Weight loss.
1, abdominal cramping. 2, increased intake of low-nutrient foods. 3, anal leakage. Or 4, addiction.
I'm going to say addiction.
Addiction, number 4.
Yes.
And the correct answer is, yes, of course, addiction. Abdominal cramping, anal leakage, and then gorging on the stuff that causes them. No, this is a bad product. Do not bring this back.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. What a quality.
No, what's worse is you can now take this in a pill form to mess up all the fat you eat.
Oh, Jesus, really?
Yeah, it's actually a diet pill that works that way. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It is.
The sad part is I remember when it came out, a bunch of people were like, this stuff causes anal leakage. I have to try it.
What?
Because it's fascinating. Like, why the hell? Okay.
Okay, I can be fascinated, with anal leakage without actually wanting to experience it myself.
Wait,
And to
Michael,
clarify,
you're fascinated by anal leakage?
I said I could be. Could be. Hypothetical. Moving on.
Okay, send all photos and stories to Michael. Okay, so Dan.
Yes.
Would you prefer a wholesome diet or MC Hammer would approve?
I think I have a better chance of getting the wholesome diet question right.
Okay, a wholesome diet. Here we go. In 1830, Sylvester Graham was a Presbyterian minister and early vegetarian who believed people were fat because 1. God had cursed them. 2. They were carrying swamp gas around in their bellies.
Oh, God.
Yep, we know that's it.
3. They had too much sex. Or 4. They drank too much water.
I don't know this. They
Of course
all
you do.
sound. Is it the swamp gas?
Yes, we've established this.
Are you going with a swamp gas?
Well, only because I have nothing better to choose, and Michael seems to be cheering for it. So, yay, swamp gas.
Okay, I'm gonna go off, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of a clue.
Okay.
The name of the person we're discussing is Sylvester Graham.
Yeah, I just can't believe that he thought fat people were having too much sex. Sometimes that's true, but I don't think he believed that.
Yeah.
All right, you know what though? Given your expert guidance and tutelage, I will go with the oversexed fat person.
You are in fact correct.
I got it.
Sylvester Graham thought that sex led to weight gain.
Oh my God.
So all of his vegetarianism, coming up with graham crackers to try and curb sexual cravings. There you go. Fat people were too damn sexy.
Did he believe maybe? I'm trying to think because it's just so not the stereotype. I'm just trying to think if maybe he thought that people who have a lot of sex have a lot of appetite in general.
It's probably a connection.
I bet it's that.
Or
All right.
like if you're not having sex, it's because you're exercising good self-control, like that weird backwards mindset. And so
Exactly,
fat
yeah.
people don't have self. Yeah.
So we have our correlational versus causal relationship here.
Or
Or
nonsense
just
versus
insanity.
what?
Yeah, like total bullshit.
All right. So our final category for all three of you, MC Hammer would approve. Do you remember his famous pants? Well, that's the connection to this particular question. The Obalon balloon pill is best described as 1. A pill that, when swallowed, absorbs liquid in the stomach, gradually increasing in size to promote a feeling of fullness. 2. A plastic cartridge on a string-like hose that is swallowed, inflated via the hose with air to make the user feel like their stomach is full. 3. A high-calorie nutrient pill to help users gain weight to balloon up. Or 4. A suppository that inflates to intentionally create a blockage in order to make eating unpleasant.
I'm gonna say the pill on the little hose that inflates.
Pill on the hose?
Yeah, I think that's what it is too. I think I might know that.
I'm gonna go for the first one, the one that just absorbs
Absorbs liquids?
liquid. Yeah, and then just
The correct answer is, in fact, a plastic cartridge on a string-like hose.
Yeah.
oh god,
This is an actual product that's out there.
is it supposed to be self-administered?
I think it's supposed to be administered by a doctor.
Yeah, it is. It's by a doctor, and you swallow this. And the reason you swallow it is so he doesn't have to cram it down you. And you swallow the pill. It's tiny enough that it has this little hose to it. And then they gradually fill it up with air and leave it there.
Can we talk about the potential genius invention that Don has come up with, though? Number 4, the suppository. Like, this could be a game changer.
I could market that shit and people would buy it. I will sell it through Goop and people will be all over it. It's a crystal balloon.
Also not self-administered if you really want to have a good time.
I mean, technically
God.
anything that's self-administered could be recreationally administered by all sorts of people.
Yeah.
Ooh, I do have a tip.
Oh, yes, please. Just the tip.
Yes, just the tip. So there is I saw a few people I know on Facebook sharing this. If you are in need of a reusable mask, there is a company based out of New York. It's JCRT, jc-rt.com. And it is this bear couple that their company does very stylish plaid shirts. And they're designers. They opened the company in 2016. It's Jeffrey Castillo and Robert, let's hope I can get this right, Tagliapietra.
Dan?
It sounds like Tagliapietra.
Yes.
There you go.
And so all of their plaids are kind of, they pick different movies and different things from pop culture to inspire their patterns. But they have reopened their factories to make masks. And they're selling them 5 for $30, which is the best price I've seen for any reusable masks. They're basically just trying to cover the cost of producing the masks. But you can also purchase a pack of 5 that they'll donate $20. So instead of $30, you'll pay $50. They donate $20 to the COVID Emergency Response Fund.
Nice. Yeah.
I just love that we've come to the point of the pandemic where bears are donating their flannel.
It's serious times, everybody. I think, so if anyone, if Trevor and Dan came to visit a socially distant, a very responsible socially distant visit in my driveway for my birthday. And when I looked, they rolled down the windows and they're both wearing these like itty bitty, 2-inch square, baby sized masks.
Okay, so these masks,
it's especially baby sized on Trevor's big face.
Yes, these I got from a friend. I don't know if it was for my birthday or just a souvenir when he went to Japan last year. They are Winnie the Pooh child disposable face masks. So
which you got to get on. Trevor's face covers like almost his nose and mouth.
Yes,
maybe
a very tiny square. Which it's getting the job done for now. I have some reusable masks that I don't know if they're going to come or not. I also ordered some from this company to support them. If you're looking for, reusable face masks, we'll share the information on all of our lovely things, which I guess has music now.
Yes. And okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
So we are on Instagram and Twitter as @BigFatGayPod. We're on Facebook as the Big Fat Gay Podcast. You can check out our website and all the lovely stuff we talk about in this episode at www.bigfatgaypod.com. Also, leave us a 5-star review on Apple or maybe Stitcher.
Yes, I think there's only 2 that...
Even Facebook.
Facebook,
Facebook,
you can go on there and leave
5 stars on Facebook.
And we have a really lovely community of people who like to comment and a lot of times have very interesting things to say. So you could also get to know some cool people.
Yeah. And maybe you are in your car listening. Maybe you decided to take a drive, but it's there's someone behind you, but they have a face mask on, so it's okay.
And wait, and sorry, what day was it again?
It's Wednesday if you're listening on the day it came out. Watch out.